This is Mindset, mental health news and information. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm your host, James Curtis. What we do here on Mindset is more than just bring you cutting-edge news and information about mental health. Instead, we connect that news with stories about everyday life, from parenting to relationships to living with and even thriving with a serious mental health issue. So, take the Mindset Challenge. Dare to see mental health differently. On today's show,
there's not a person in the world who doesn't know somebody who has depression or bipolar disorder or binge drinks too much or, has some DUIs and his marriage is on the rocks. I mean, there's not a person in the world who doesn't know somebody who fits one of those criteria. And so it's a very human story that anyone can relate to, male or female, black, white, yellow, green, young and old. It's a human, relatable story.
That's Carolina-based therapist Melissa Tate, Dr. Melissa Tate. If you've ever struggled with an adult relationship with your wife, your husband, parents, girlfriend, brother, sister, coworker, all right, let's just say all of them, you can probably relate to the idea that we've all had relationships with people that have been problematic. And the truth of the matter is sometimes we are the problem. Well, that's our main topic today. Problem relationships, from friends to intimate relationships, how to make them work. But first, this news from the Mindset Report. The Mindset Report, available online at mindsetreport.com. The Mindset Report, your most comprehensive online source for mental health news. This week's Mindset Report is underwritten by Haven Insurance. Haven Insurance, your complete insurance resource for home, business, and auto, offering a written money-back guarantee. Find them online at haveninsuranceonline.com or toll free at 877-4 Haven 4 877-442-8364. From NPR News, more than 50 million adults in the United States have a disorder such as insomnia, restless leg syndrome, or sleep apnea, according to an Institute of Medicine report. The report concludes that a lack of sleep not only increases the risk of errors and accidents, it also increases a person's risk for cardiovascular disease, diabetes infections, and maybe even Alzheimer's. From LivingWorks and the Pacific Daily News, September is National Suicide Prevention Month, and the Guam Department of Education has trained 150 school bus drivers on how to recognize and approach the topic of suicide with students and other adults. According to a Department of Education representative, those at risk don't approach their doctors about their thoughts. It's more likely they'll confide in parents, a close friend, their coach, or even an online acquaintance. For these and other mental health stories, check out the Mindset Report online at mindsetreport.com. Today's topic, family to intimate relationships, making problem relationships work. We're back in just a moment. Welcome back to Mindset, Mental Health News and Information. I'm your host, James Curtis. Today's topic, how to handle problem relationships, whether it's a friend, a coworker, partner, your parent, your child. Dr. Melissa Tate has some great information and insight drawn from her own experience, professionally and personally. She has a book due out this month, Blind Passenger, which takes a unique, plain-speaking approach to helping us understand how to cope with those relationships. Before I got into the nuts and bolts of my conversation about the book with Dr. Melissa Tate, I was curious about why she chose this particular focus for her work. My guest is Dr. Melissa Tate, psychotherapist, technically called a psychology consultant based in North Carolina. You're pretty cool. You're really very impressive. You've got a lot going on. You see patients, you see clients as a therapist. You're working on a book, and indeed, you have your own radio show.
Yes, WGIV Charlotte, WDRB Media. We broadcast through the TuneIn radio app and through the internet. So you can catch my show. It's called Meditate and Mingle every Sunday at 12 noon through either one of those venues. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me today. You do a bunch of things. So I want to talk about the different things that you do in your practice. But what I want to most talk about is your book. You have an upcoming book called Blind Passenger.
Yeah.
That is a very intriguing name. And as a fan of, book thrillers and movies and Dexter and that kind of thing, it makes me think about some scary stuff. How did you come to that name?
The basis of the book is about being caught on somebody else's emotional roller coaster. And so for the person that you're in relationship with, or whether it's an intimate relationship or it's a sibling or it's a friend or a coworker, whoever it is that you have a relationship with, and they have so many ups and downs and levels of instability. So you're riding their emotional roller coaster by proxy of the relationship that you have with them. And you don't fully understand what's going on. You just know that something doesn't feel right. So you're kind of blinded, and a lot of times we don't want to know what's going on. We're blinded by love. We're blinded by ego. We're blinded by embarrassment. We're blinded by loyalty, and we don't allow ourselves to fully see the emotional roller coaster that our loved ones are on. And the emotional roller coaster I'm referring to would be like addiction, mental illness, alcoholism, those issues that really create some ups and downs in people's relationships, and we don't really allow ourselves to fully see what's going on and understand what's going on because we are on the emotional roller coaster with them.
Well, I like that. I really like that. I don't think I've ever heard that type of description about what some might call, and tell me if this is correct, codependency. That is the interaction that we have in the relationship that we have with another person, and that kind of throws us off kilter. Is that about what we're talking about?
Yes. It's codependency. It's enabling relationships. It's allowing the relationship to almost to the point where you lose parts of yourself because you're giving so much to trying to assist someone else or trying to be there for someone else, or and the impact that has on your own self-worth.
Your focus is to try to get the broader message of psychotherapy out, the broader message of mental health and fighting stigma and all of those things that a lot of people think are important. Give us your take on that and how you got to where you are with it.
I started in the field of psychology, or at least majored in psychology in undergrad. And I've worked in so many different environments that people don't typically recognize as needing a psychology background, but I've worked in public schools, I've worked in crisis treatment, I've worked in substance abuse treatment, I've worked in emergency rooms, I've worked in psychiatric hospitals, and so I really have a large kind of general background.
And you've seen it all, I would suspect. You've done a lot of different...
I haven't been surprised by much these days.
Wow. I'm looking at your photograph, your shot on your website. You don't look like you're much past 25. How did you fit all that in, plus the degrees and all of that? I mean, how long have you been at this?
Let's see. I've been licensed in psychology and in mental health since 2005. So it's been about 10 years that I've been in the field. And over those 10 years, I would say what was helpful for my career was that I really got a good glimpse of mental health very early, severe mental health very early. So I worked with very severe psychiatrically ill populations, sometimes homeless, often using drugs, underinsured, extreme forms of bipolar disorder where people are hearing voices, extreme forms of suicide and self-harm, extreme forms of trauma, rape trauma, violence and child abuse and neglect, and all of that encompassed in the Baltimore City urban market, which is highly flooded with substances, heroin and crack cocaine and drug use. So that was really my first live introduction into the field of psychology, and it was very, what's the word I'm looking for? It was powerful because you could see almost, people at their worst places. And then as my career went on, I worked in public schools, working with at-risk youth populations that were at risk for maybe teenage pregnancy, or at risk for dropout, or at risk for gangs, or bullying prevention, suicide prevention, and sexual harassment and sexual promiscuity. So just targeting a lot of those issues for our teenage population. I also transitioned into working with, again, very severe psychiatrically disturbed young ladies, victims of trauma, some of them with traumatic brain injury, some of them with intellectual deficits.
It sounds like you really just dived off into the deep end of this.
Yes, exactly.
In a real in a very significant and substantial way. How did you even get to, what was it about your background, your own experience growing up that drew you to this line of work? Because this is not for the faint of heart.
No. And, that's a good question. I don't think there's anything specific about my background that called me into mental health. I grew interested in psychology just by nature of being able to read something in the book and then being able to apply it in life. Something very simple, something like how children attach to their parents, or, how a baby develops over time. So just very simple things. It just in our life process. I could read about it in class, and then I'd be walking up the street and I could see it happening in front of me. And so that's what drew me to psychology from the very beginning. I think I also had an interest just kind of in the shows that you see on TV, the Law and Orders and the CSI and, the psychological thrillers. I think I've always had an interest in those types of movies and that type of the First 48, things that you see on TV. And I think I've always had an interest in what drives human behavior, what drives people to do the things they do. I think that's what fuels me more than anything. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm not going to let you off the hook quite that easy, even though that was a very nice answer.
Yes.
Because certainly the idea of being drawn to human behavior could take you in a number of different directions. It wouldn't necessarily take you into this very complex, intensely critical work. It could have taken you into medicine. You could have become an ancillary mental health worker, a social worker, or stayed in teaching or something like that. But you chose to dive off into the EMT of mental health sort of kind of work, right?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, yeah.
So why? I mean, that's a lot. And is it simply aptitude and interest?
Initially, when I started working, and I was working for the mobile crisis team in Baltimore City. So when I started working with that team, I was intrigued by kind of the multidisciplinary aspect of how you reach someone in the community that's in crisis. So there was a crisis hotline, which phone calls came into the hotline 24 hours a day. A call would be dispatched out to the mobile crisis team. The mobile crisis team consists of a mental health counselor and usually a nurse, sometimes a psychiatrist. And you go out into the field wherever people were in the city limits, and you assess the situation. You had to walk away from that situation with a diagnosis and a tentative plan to basically triage the situation and get the person the care that they needed so that they were no longer in crisis. So it's never, I wouldn't say that's something I aspired to do, like this is what I want to do. It was a job that once it became open and available to me, I said, that sounds interesting. So it was, in that respect, it was just an interest. And I do like psychology, so I wanted to understand. And, of course, you want to help people. At the end of the day, I want to help people that are in a vulnerable situation if they're seeking help.
Again, that was a nice answer that was really packaged well, and you've obviously thought about this a lot and that kind of thing. I think there's something else going on. Let me give you my take on this, and you give me your reaction.
Okay.
I think you're just a nice person with a big heart, and you're really smart. I think that's what it comes down to.
Is that it?
I think that, yeah, you're obviously bright. You've done all these very interesting things in these disciplines and worked in these areas. It takes a lot to understand and to be able to apply it, especially in this triage crisis when people are going through the rough stuff. It takes obviously an intellectual curiosity, but it takes a huge capacity, I think, of caring for other human beings. Not everybody has that, Dr. Tate.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly recognize that, but it's not something that I can articulate. Not that I can't articulate, but it's not something that I guess it's just in me. So it's not something that I say, well, I have a tremendous passion for people. And that's not something that I articulate in that way. If I can help someone who's suffering in a situation, absolutely. That's what I'm going to do.
After the break, Greek lessons. Okay, it's just a couple of words in Greek, 3 to be exact, but they are in Greek and they could be the keys to handling that problem relationship that you might be struggling with. Stay with us.